Now, I know this is a very hotly debated subject, but I want to share with you the ugly truth about human resources. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about the human resources function, and I want to dispel some myths for you. And I speak with experience because I've worked for the last 20 years of my career in human resources functions, specifically in both human resource management and in recruiting, for some of the world's largest and most well-known companies, and also some smaller, less well-known companies. So I've got a full gamut of experience, and I want to share with you some of the perspective that I have. And as I go through and I read a lot of the comments that come in, there is an underwriting flavor of bitterness and anger, I guess maybe, and maybe jaded is a better way to describe it, from people about the human resources function. And I honestly totally get it, because there's kind of a viewpoint of, well, we thought human resources was supposed to be on our side. They're supposed to be an advocate. And at a fundamental level, that's true. But I want to kind of give you a bit of a broader perspective. Let's paint it with a little bit broader brush and give you the undisclosed or the ugly truth about human resources and what its true function is in an organization. And now I will use a disclaimer and say I don't agree with everything that human resources does. Even though I've worked in that field, I am an employee advocate. I've always been an employee advocate to the degree that the employee is doing the right thing. Obviously, if you come into a situation where you're not acting properly and you have an adverse employment decision, you really need to own that. And I will say that the human resources function as a whole, a vast majority of them are very compassionate people who really believe strongly in doing the right thing, being an employee advocate, being all those things that you kind of had this preconceived notion of. But there is a layer to the human resources function that you should be aware of. And I want to give you a little bit more insight from kind of peeling back the curtain a little bit about what that is. So I think that there's a misconception that human resources is your friend. You can go off to them and you can confide in them and your issues and all of this stuff. But I think what you have to keep in mind is, yes, you can do that. And if you're experiencing issues, and in particular, if they're legal issues or, those types of things that are very sensitive, you should go to the human resources department, because it's going to at least kind of CYA, if you kind of catch my drift, rather than trying to deal with some of those very sticky situations. I'm thinking like harassment. I'm thinking like anything that you'd be reporting, anything that would be illegal, things like that. You definitely don't want to internalize that and let them continue to happen and not say anything, because you can actually put yourself into a bigger issue if you don't. But if you are dealing in a situation where maybe it's performance related, or you have an issue with your boss, or all those kinds of things, you really need to think about it strategically. And that's where I wanted to make this video, because I see a lot of these comments coming in from people who are frustrated and bitter. In fact, somebody keeps on leaving the same comment over and over again about their three people that they can't trust or that they hate the most, and it's like lawyers and something else, and human resources people. Which, if you feel that strongly, I see the comments, and I on some level I can get it, but I also see the comments when I see people that are particularly bitter. My first reaction is you probably had an adverse employment decision happen against you, and you haven't really worked or processed that. So let's take ownership in our situations, that things happen in the business world and it can be very cutthroat, and we just have to know that going in. And that's why I set up this channel, to really talk about how to manage yourself, how to take ownership of your career, and really how to set yourself up so that you are in control versus allowing other people around you to be in control. So you should take ownership and reflect very honestly back on yourself. If you were in a situation where you were treated or you feel jaded by the human resources function, know that there are indeed 100% people in those functions that maybe aren't the best people, or the best people, if that makes sense. Because I've experienced that in my career, where I've had to deal with things where it was like head scratching and going like, how could you be so cold, or how could you be so calculated, and it happens. So I think it's important to know that does happen, but for the vast majority of issues that happen in a work setting that human resources in particular gets involved in, there's usually a degree of, yeah, that's probably happening, some of the coldness and some of the calculatedness, but there's also a degree of, you probably did stuff in your career too, that, or in the situation that you're in, that got you there to begin with. And so it's hard for people to step backward and look objectively at a situation and then be able to apply the learning from it, because they're so emotionally invested into the situation that it's easy just to lash out and blame other people. So I'm going to just say that. I mean, I've had people tell me on my channel that HR is the enemy, and I kind of laugh about that. I mean, I don't take it personally, because I get that it's easy to lash out at the guy on the internet, on YouTube, that who's talking about this stuff. But I do find it funny that people, I'm sitting here giving you advice on how to manage this stuff and how to steer your way through, and really give you deep and true and intimate knowledge that is truly from behind the scenes, yet I'm the enemy. So I don't, again, it doesn't hurt my feelings or, whatever, but if you are somebody that feels compelled enough to write a nasty email or a nasty comment and give me a thumbs down because of this, I think you really need to look at yourself and go, okay, why is it that you feel that way? Why is it that where's the root cause of it? And what part of that root cause of the frustration did you create yourself? Because you're not going to be able to move beyond it, and you're not going to be able to have a functioning career if you can't like transmute that energy and understand it, and then position yourself differently moving forward. It's almost like if you react that way, it's because you're wounded. You had a wound somewhere that you have not healed or not worked your way through the energy of it. And I think it's really important to do that, because you're just going to go into your next opportunity and you're going to be jaded, and you're going to be very skeptical, and it's going to show. And you I believe that you attract that kind of energy to you. If you put whatever you put out into the universe comes back to you. It's okay to feel that way and feel angry and feel upset when something happens, but then also you should apply the learning to it. Sit back, go, okay, where did I contribute to this situation, and be very honest with yourself, and then apply learning. Let's talk about the human resource function. Most people seem to forget that at its core, the human resources function is still part of it's a business department. It wasn't set up originally to be a department for people, right? Even though the name and I hate the term human resources, so I don't like that term. I did not make it up, and nobody seems to listen to me when I suggest we should change the name. So some companies actually do call it other things, which I can appreciate, but I don't like the term human resources. At the very core level, at the very top level, human resources is a very strategic business partner to the most senior levels of leadership. So it's kind of like the right-hand man or woman, I guess you could say, for the very top leadership. And usually at the very highest levels, the HR department or the HR function is very closely aligned to the business strategy. And so there's usually a CHRO or somebody that sits directly on the executive council that is very closely aligned. And it doesn't matter the size of the company. Every company that I've ever worked at, the human resources person has a lot of closed doors meetings with the presidents, with the CEOs, with the executive team, and is really kind of behind the scenes getting into a lot of that strategy. HR's primary purpose, though, is not people, and some HR people will probably just say, no, that you don't know what you're talking about. But if you hear me out, HR's primary purpose is to mitigate risk, to implement risk avoidance, and then compliance. That's the primary directive. So it's to mitigate risk, to ensure risk avoidance, and then to make sure that you comply. When that's with legalese, like the legal, so you keep the company out of hot water legally. And that's the ultimate driving mission of all HR departments. The next tier down, I would say that's the first guiding light. The next tier down would then be strategic alignment to business decisions. So if the business wants to go in a certain direction, the HR department then its purpose is to align the talent and with the overall business strategy. So they're looking at their organizations and then making sure they've got the right people in place to get to where the executive team wants to go. And that's in a lot of cases where people experience layoffs, they experience adverse employment decisions. If you are not part of the strategic direction of where the company is going, you're going to get that letter, that pink slip that's going to say, thanks for your time, but we've reorganized and you're no longer a good fit for this organization. So it doesn't mean that you're a bad employee, doesn't mean that you are not capable. It just means that your particular position or what you contributed in that position was not a good strategic alignment for where they wanted to go. And that's where the coldness and the calculatedness comes in, because it is truly at that level, it is a business decision. And the business decisions can seem very calculated and very cutthroat. And that's where HR gets a really bad rap, is because they're the deliverers of bad news. It's not like HR, well, in some cases they do. They sit down very closely with the executive committee, and they kind of they look at workforce, they lay out all the people on the spreadsheets for all the different organizations, and they look at all the different core competencies that they have, and then they make their decisions. And it's literally, you're a number and you're a name and you're data, and you basically, and it sucks to think of it that way, but that's the truth of it. That's kind of the blunt truth. And in a lot of cases, if you're just data on a chart, the metrics supporting where they want to go, or the skill sets that they need, are going to be made at that level through talent planning and all that kind of stuff. Now, on this channel, I do talk a lot about that concept, about getting caught off guard, not being in charge of your career, letting organizations steer you, and then you're completely at the mercy of an organization to keep you gainfully employed. And that's what gets people into a lot of trouble. So if this type of content is interesting to you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and check out some of my older videos, because I do really talk a lot about this concept of getting yourself into an independence, thinking of yourself as a free agent, and becoming more in control of where your career is heading. Then I would say the final purpose of HR is then what you kind of think of in terms of typical HR departments, is to attract, develop, and retain talent. And they do that through a variety of functions, through recruitment, through establishing business practices and policies. Is actually kind of falls under the compliance and risk avoidance, but the developing, hiring people, developing them, and then kind of the benefits administration and kind of that service oriented HR function, which most of us are familiar with. You go to your HR department if you have an issue with your paycheck or benefits, or some other issue with time off or something like that, or you want to complain about somebody who's harassing you or something like that. So that's where you go to HR, and that's kind of that's actually, in my opinion. Now this is all my opinion, but this is my 20 years of experience of observing. These are the three hierarchies, and the lower levels is where you typically find the compassionate people, because the HR is full of compassionate people that are in, like, especially at the employee level, I'll call it. Maybe it's at a plant or at a location where you're working, where you go into somebody's office and you talk to that local HR rep who is genuinely interested in helping you and trying to make your employment situation the best. But those are kind of at the lower levels. As you get higher in the organizations, it becomes much more strategic and much more calculated, and that's where the coldness kind of comes in. And usually it's not a personal thing. It's a very business-oriented decision. It's very calculated. And that's where it's hard to separate your emotion, because again, we're emotional people and emotional creatures, and that's just the nature of us. And when you have this very calculated coldness to business decisions, that's where people have a hard time. It's almost like a betrayal in a way, like, how could you do this to me? I've been working here for all these years and dedicated my life to to the mission, and how could you do that? And because it comes down to a business decision, and if you are on the wrong side of that business decision, and if you become complacent in your career, and you've allowed a company to, you've never really you've trusted the company to do the right thing for you. You've placed your trust into an organization that ultimately at the end of the day is going to make the best business decision. And so it doesn't always mean that it's going to be you that's going to have the best outcome in that. So we have to take back our careers. We have to be free agents. We have to prepare ourselves to survive I shouldn't say even survive, to thrive in these situations. Because if you truly own your career and you truly have direction and you know exactly where you're going, then these types of situations become less important or less impactful to you, because you're your own independent person. You're not somebody that has been at a company for 20 years and now that's how you identify yourself as. You become an independent, a free agent, who maybe the free agent re-signs with the company over and over and over again. It's just like a free agent on a sports team. You have some people spend their entire career on a certain team, and then you've got other ones that kind of journeyman them their way around and that's how they get the highest comp ranges or the paychecks, and they get the best or fastest career path. But there's also a valid path to stay in the same company and just keep on resigning. But you still have to treat yourself as a free agent. You still have to go hit the weight room and prepare and practice and make sure that you're at the top of your game, because you own your own career. So I want to make sure that people understand that. HR at its highest level is aligned to business senior leaders. If you go into it thinking that the HR function is designed to be your friend, it's a cold, hard reality that unfortunately people learn about kind of too late. If you're in a situation where you feel like you need to engage the human resource department above kind of the surface level HR stuff, I would suggest before you do that, like if you're dealing with some significant friction in your organization with maybe your boss, maybe with other coworkers that are influential, be really careful to try to resolve any issues that you can without getting human resources involved. That's what I would suggest. Now, again, you want to make sure that you cover your own self, and especially when it gets into legality issues and stuff that could come back to bite you if you don't say something about it. So I want you to be very careful there. But if it's something that, you have a personality conflict, or you're just, you want to complain or something like that, I would be very careful to try to address the situation if you can, and it makes sense, at your level first before you go in. Now, if you got benefits issues, you got paycheck issues, you got policy interpretation problems and stuff like that, then fine. I mean, by all means, please go see your HR department. They're there to help. But if you're looking at kind of a bigger thing, if you start to develop reputations, because when a human resource department hears something, if you say something in a meeting with them and they hear it, and even if it's kind of innocent on your part, they are required to push it up the telephone pole, so to speak, the flagpole. So we can't not do something about it, because again, it's that, going back to that first one, it's the risk avoidance. If you say something that now I hear and I say, okay, that's risk, and we have to minimize that, and I'm aware of it, now I'm held liable. So that's why you got to be really careful when you go in and you decide you want to complain about something. I probably wouldn't recommend venting to your human resources department, because the whole time that they're listening to you, they're listening for, is there a legal risk in what you're telling me? And is there something that I need to get in front of from a corporate perspective? Because ultimately the human resource department is a corporate function. It was built and implemented by the highest levels of the corporation. It was not built by the employees. So does that make sense? And I know that sounds kind of cold, hard, ugly reality of it, but the reality of it is human resources departments formed 80 to 100 years ago as personnel departments to staff for these big, huge mega corporations like the steel manufacturers. Back at in the kind of the Industrial Revolution, that's where the personnel department came out, and it was not to be an advocate for the employee; it was to be an advocate for the business, to make sure that the business had the resources that they needed to produce the products that they needed. You got to keep that in mind when you decide to go in and walk over to your human resources person, that they are really listening. At least most human resource department are going to be listening for risk. It's a risk avoidance. That's kind of the situation with human resources. I hope that this kind of clarifies the situation for, if you are feeling angry, upset, mad, bitter, just know that that's the situation. Just know that there is people inside of HR that don't like it either, but that's just how it is. And just try to be strategic and forward thinking with your career. So if you found value in this video, would really appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't hit the subscribe button already, would love to have a subscribe button from you as well, and hit that notification bell, because I've got a lot of great content planned. It keeps on. I've got a whole laundry list of things that I'm planning on covering on the channel. So I'd love to have you along as a subscriber. If you are in a situation where you dealt with an adverse employment decision and you are looking for more help, that's actually what I specialize in. So I've actually got a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. It is loaded with tips and tricks, all from a recruiter and HR professional insider perspective, and there's a bunch of free resources on there, so go and check that out. I also have a couple of training courses that will help you get back on your feet if you are somebody that is looking for a job or had gotten laid off and was really trying to get back on your feet. The first one is called Resume Rocketfuel. Resume Rocketfuel is really designed to get you that first interview. So if you are not getting interviews and you're not getting a lot of activity on your profile, chances are it's your resume that is the issue, and we need to correct that. And so I actually took all of my knowledge as a corporate recruiter over 20 years and my experience as a professional resume writer, and I basically transferred all that to a course. So you should check that out. And then that's designed to get you the first interview. Once you get the first interview, the next step in the process would be, how do you get from the first interview all the way to the offer? And I have another course for that that's called the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp, and it's my most deep and intimate knowledge. So I share a lot of stuff here. I share a lot of value. I give you the most deep and intimate knowledge, step by step, each part of the hiring process, what hiring managers are looking for. We actually review hiring manager feedback and what I hear most commonly from hiring managers, so that you can position yourself as strategically as possible to get through all those different steps. So if you are struggling with your job search, I would encourage you to check that out. There's also a free 5-day job seeker bootcamp that you might want to check out as well. So lots of stuff over on Life After Layoff. So head over there and check it out. And I appreciate you watching this long long video that kind of goes off in some different little mini tangents. But appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.